Hi and welcome to this tutorial. I'll be showing you how to edit the RGD files in Company of Heroes, short for Relic Game Data, and my working example is creating an allied custom assault squad with a bazooka, everyone having Tommy guns, Browning, and a radio operator who can call in airstrikes. This tutorial is pretty brief, but find the written component and it's far more comprehensive. Thanks. First off, we want to open up the Mod Studio program and create a new mod. Name it Assault Squad or something like that, and click Create. It'll load up languages and then we'll be ready to start. Doing this is create a new folder called Assault Squad in your Company of Heroes directory in which all of our extracted files are kept. Keep that in mind for later. As a basis for the radio guy, we're going to be using the Rifleman Sergeant, who can be found in the following directory. We're using him because he's the model in-game that's carrying the radio. It's worth noting here that we're not actually editing any models, we're merely editing the attributes that are associated with them in-game. We'll just call this one Infantry Rifleman Radio, and we'll be ready to duplicate the other entries for the basis of our other soldiers. Through duplicating this entry, we're actually creating a new file in the aforementioned Assault Squad folder in your Company Heroes directory. For the other soldiers, we'll be using the Infantry Rifleman as a base, and for our officer, we'll be using Officer Lieutenant, who can be found lower down. As you can see, I'm naming each of the entries after the weapon that the soldier will be carrying. That's because each individual soldier in the game is actually a unique entity, right the way down to the weapon that they're carrying. This will become clearer when we start putting them into a squad. There are 4 things that we'll do to customize the soldiers that we just created. Customizing their weapon loadout, tweaking their hit points, adding the strafing ability to the radio man, and adjusting their costs. First, we'll take a look at modding the officer. Double-clicking on the officer's entry will bring up his attributes tab to the right. This is where we actually do all the RGD editing. For now, we're just interested in modifying the cost, the health, and the combat extension, which is where his weapons are listed. Notice each time you click on one of the tables, all its values come up on the right. You can actually extend these and go further down into the listing to get more detail. Right now I'm just modifying the build time, the cost and the health of the officer, just making it cheaper so the squad, when we make it in the end, won't cost too much or take too much time to build. Every time you change a value, make sure to save it, otherwise when you click on another value that change might be lost. A unit's weapon is listed under the combat extension and the hard points. I'll extend this now and have a look at what the officer has at the moment. Currently he's armed with a pistol, but we want to put a Tommy gun in there. To do this, we actually have to change the directory listing that's just there to the code that links it up with the Tommy gun rather than the pistol. Down here we find all the weapons in the game. We can see the pistol listed just here, but if we go into the machine gun category we can see the Tommy gun. So if we change the last couple of lines in the value just here, we can link up the Tommy gun to the officer rather than the pistol. Use the code line shown just below. It's worth noting that you can arm any entity with absolutely any weapon in the game through the hard points. You can even arm soldiers with 88 flak cannons. The model won't show up in the game, but the projectile and damage will be the same. Now I'm just adding the different weapons to the different soldiers using the code below. You can find the bazooka in the ballistics category and the Browning in the light machine guns category. Just make sure that you arm your radio man and assault trooper with Tommy gun, and we're ready to go. To create the abilities, we use a similar process as we did with the soldiers. We're just finding an ability which we're going to be used as a base, which is the Allied Airstrike ability Strafe, and duplicating it. Then we'll be removing the prereqs for it and putting it into the Radio Man Strafing ability tab. When we're actually modifying the ability, the things that we have to take care of include prereqs, cost, and the UI group position, which is where the button will appear in the command panel in-game. Removing the requirements just means a radio man can use it by himself without having to unlock any skills. Something that attention should be paid to here is balancing issues. So you have to somehow balance the fact that there's a squad with this ability with maybe its recharge time or cost, and somehow make it prohibitive to use. Otherwise you can end up with something that's overpowered and overused in-game. Now we're up to setting up the UI group position, and doing this will determine where the button for the ability itself appears in the command panel. Setting it to a number like 5 will mean it appears in the first button of the second row of the squad's command panel. The diagram just there highlights. And now we're actually up to putting it in the Radio Man's abilities bag. Right, well, by opening up the RadioMans tab, we see that the abilities are listed up the top, and opening up that'll give us access to the abilities table. Now, in a similar way to how we linked up the weapons to the other soldiers, we can now link up the ability to the Radioman by putting it in slot 3. Now, in order to use these units in the game, we actually have to put them into a squad. The squads are listed in the SBPS directory, and open up the allies and the soldiers. As a basis for ours, we'll just be using a rifleman, and we'll be changing the squad loadout and listing all our units there. Same method as for the abilities and the weapons, just put in the directory listing. And it's worth noting here that every unit in the game that's producible is actually a squad. Even an individual Sherman tank is a squad by itself. It makes for a very flexible way of managing the smaller assets in the game. So here we've loaded out our squad. The max and num values just determine how many units of that type there are in the squad. Finally, we just go and set up the UI for the squad itself. Here I'm using the Company Heroes UCS reference editor, which has a whole heap of numbers that are associated with lines of text that appear in the game. I've put the Assault Squad reference under the number of 15 million, and now by putting 15 million in Mod Studio, it links up the text. Finally, I just set the UI group position to 3, and this means the squad will appear in slot 3 of the barracks once we put it in. The final step is just putting our squad into the barracks. We do this by editing the barracks.rgd file and just putting it in the spawner _ extension. So there's the spawner table. Finally, we just make sure Mod Studio is running in dev mode and we can run our mod. Thanks.